All right, let's go ahead and jump into this, everyone. My name is Vince. I want to welcome you for tuning in to another episode of Novedge's Best of the Best webinar series. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We're really excited not only to present HDR Light Studio, but to have Mark Segasby on board presenting for us. Just a little background on Mark before we get started here. He's the co-founder of Lightmap. He is a product designer working for 6 years in the design sector before specializing in product and transport CGI design visualization. During his time, HDR Light Studio was created and developed with co-founder Simon C. Smith. This interactive image-based lighting software is now used worldwide by 3D artists, creating photoreal images of cars, products, jewelry, and much more. Mark is a true pro, and I want to thank him again for participating in our webinar series. I think we're in for a real treat with this presentation. Mark's going to speak for about the next 40 minutes or so. During that time, everyone will be in listen-only mode, but definitely feel free to shoot your questions into the question box as they come in. At the end, we'll open up for a Q&A and get to as many questions as time allows. We will be recording this webinar, so if anyone is curious as to where you can find it, where you can find the recording, I'll give complete details as soon as Mark's done with his presentation. But having said all that, I want to turn it over to Mark so we can get right into this. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone.
I'm going to switch it over to you and let you take it from there.
Awesome. So, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you to Vince and for Novedge for giving this opportunity to talk about our software. And also thank you for everybody who's watching and taking some time out to come and see what this is all about. So I think what I'll start by doing is just taking you through the kind of a bit of background about lighting and about computer graphics, and then we can kind of get straight into kind of looking at the software and what it does. But there's a lot of confusion about HDR and what it is, and it's always good to just kind of start with the basics. So essentially a HDR image is an image that is capturing the full lighting information that's in a scene. So here we have a view of a room taken from a single point with a sphere on camera, and essentially we're looking at different exposure values within the same image. So one image captures the true brightness of the light per pixel. So here within a HDR image we can see, when we turn down the brightness, we can see the detail of the clouds outside. When we turn up the brightness, this goes out to white on your monitor, but you can actually see the details in the kind of mid-tones. And as you push up to really blow out the image, you can actually see there's a lot of information in the dark areas. So the problem with a computer monitor is that it displays low dynamic range images from brightness 0, black, to white, which is 255. And if you was looking at your computer monitor and looking at something that was totally white, and then you looked outside at the sun beaming in through your window, that's many, many times brighter than something you can display on your screen. So in the real world, values aren't clamped to 255. They actually can be limitless in terms of their brightness. So this is where HDR imaging comes in. So a HDR image captures the real brightness per pixel. And what you can do with these HDR images is here we show this HDR image that's wrapped onto a sphere in the computer graphics scene, and that's now creating illumination and reflections for this synthetic object, this computer generated object that's in the middle here. So when you use a HDR image wrapped around computer graphics, you get the synthetic object, the CG object can look really very realistic. And this is because the illumination and the reflections are kind of tied together. If there's a bright pixel, it's seen in the reflection, but it's also in the software creating the illumination. So that's a bit of a background on what HDR images are and how they're used to light objects in computer graphics. And another kind of area that's resulted in us creating HDR Light Studio is that there's the whole area of actual proper photography. And as computer artists strive to create more photoreal results, then the software itself is totally capable of this. And CG artists wonder, well, how can I get results like an actual photographer? So to do this, we really need to start looking at how photographers light objects. So here we've got a direct lighting setup for this hairdryer. And if we kind of look through the camera as what the photographer's seeing, then he's got those three light sources. And this is just the first one turned on, and this is the contribution of light on that object. So it's both creating light, but it's also predominantly being seen in these reflections. And as we move around to the other side of the object, there's just one light here, and this is that light's contribution. And then there's one on the top. And when the photographer puts all those lights on at the same time, then you have your kind of really nice photographic lighting. So the photographer is effectively using areas of light and dark, controlling the illumination and the reflections in the objects to make them look really nice. So there's also another type of lighting. Here's a studio shot being done of a car, and this was provided by Nigel Harniman on one of his shoots. And you can see here that here's the camera taking a picture of the vehicle, and what they're actually doing is they've got spotlights pointing at the wall and spotlights pointing over here in sheets and blockers and whatever. And as the photographer looks through the camera, they're using these reflected light sources to be seen in the reflections in the car. So a lot of kind of products and cars predominantly kind of controlling the reflections in an object. So when you think of actually lighting it, you wouldn't go and get a spotlight and point it straight at the bonnet of the car, because it'd just be this massive hot spot and probably look terrible. But by using reflected light sources, then you could kind of shape the light and reflections around the object to enhance what it looks like when it's photographed. So that's just a bit of background about kind of real-world photography, and hopefully all these threads will come together as we move through the presentation. So I'm going to move on to CG lighting now, and just to kind of an overview of the different types of CG lighting. And what most of you probably used to using is the actual CG light sources within your 3D software, spotlights, directional lights, and these are kind of invisible. They create kind of specular highlights, fake highlights, and there's a really commonly used type of lighting, more kind of old-fashioned type of lighting. And then we move on to kind of area lights that are visible and emitters. And these are starting to make things look a bit more realistic in our little test Stanford Dragon, because you could actually see the reflections working in harmony with the lighting. So this isn't a fake specular, that's bright because it can be seen in the reflection. That object is visible. And then this kind of brings us on to CG lighting, as in the HDR lighting, as we were talking about earlier. And here, we've got this room, this image that's got real-world brightness values for each pixel. And this is wrapped onto a sphere around the scene. And you can see here that things are looking really very realistic, because we have got these real-world brightnesses and values for the reflections and illumination all kind of tied together. It looking really good. Now, traditionally, the HDR environments have been shot photographically, but using HDR as a medium, you can actually capture lots of lighting and use that in computer graphics. So here we've got kind of a window and a zebra pattern, direct lighting of a spotlight, but then there's kind of just a little bright area here, and they're all contributing and making that render look really quite nice. Again here, a big kind of softbox above, a few spotlights So, you know, using an image, we can actually replicate many different types of light sources and surround an object and kind of make it look like it's surrounded by those lights. So it offers quite a nice way to light something. Here, this is more looking at the reflected light, like with the car. So we're not seeing a light source, we're not seeing a softbox, we're actually seeing kind of a soft lighting effect, like you'd shone a light at a wall, and then that kind of, you know, you get this kind of nice softer lighting, again, all in the HDR image. You know, these kind of effects, this is where kind of the boundaries between lighting and kind of imagery blur, in terms of here we've got kind of a sun and there's clouds and there's effects that are within this image, and they're creating all the interactions of kind of a sunset in this kind of highlight area. So within an image, you can, you know, a single lighting image, you can contain a lot of detail, and it's really quite a cool way to look at lighting things. So really that's just a little overview of, you know, we've got the background of photography and what photographers are doing in terms of lighting. We've got kind of different methods of CG lighting, and really showing how actually there's something here with image-based lighting, and that we can do a lot of things with a single image to represent the lighting around an object. So I've been, Phil Sills, a friend of mine, has let me use some images here just to kind of, again, kind of recap on what photographers are doing when they're lighting objects. And so these are real photographs, these aren't computer generated. And, you know, when we look at these objects and we think of the background I've just talked about, you can start to see how you look at the reflections of the object and how the reflections are very sympathetic to the shape of the object and help describe the form of the object, which is what the photographer's trying to do. So here you see a nice contrast as we go up the body line and we come into this panel here. This is much brighter, and the photographer's taken care to make sure that that particular body line up there, he got a difference in tone between the lighting up here and down here to kind of describe the form. Here, if you think of that dragon with the soft lighting from the HDR, then you've kind of got the same thing happening here. This is quite a nice soft lighting effect to kind of help describe the shape of this car. Again, you know, when you start looking at it, communicating the form, you know, it's the reflections and the lighting are really important to get to kind of, you know, sell the form, which is what photographers and image makers are doing. They're trying to make the form look nice in an image. And we've just got some more examples of real photography. So here we have a, you know, I think it's a softbox here reflecting in this shape, and it's been positioned at an angle and a position to enhance the appearance of the cylindrical form of this bottle. And here another couple of shots, and we've got on this bottle again we've got a nice vertical light kind of running straight up the bottle, helping accentuate its form, and then a nice bit of rim lighting over here to kind of lift that hand from the background. And, you know, hopefully you start to appreciate that you know, if we're trying to make images of products and cars, really how important the lighting is, and how they actually work together in terms of the reflections, the illumination, and with the background I've spoken about, then you can see that HDR images could capture all of this information, and we could actually use those to light objects. So now I've kind of covered that background, I'll introduce you to our software, which is HDR Light Studio. Now the timing of this presentation's been really good actually, because we're actually able to show you in this talk a new version of HDR Light Studio with some new features, and it's version 3.5, and it's just going into closed beta but it should be out in about a month's time. And it's going to be available on Windows, Mac and Linux. So previously we've only been available on Windows. So it's quite exciting for us. And I'm just going to show you the basics of the software. So I've given you the background on how powerful image-based lighting is. Now, we saw this as an opportunity and created HDR Light Studio. And what it is it lets you, use to purchase HDR images and that were kind of shot photographically, and we thought, what if you could use that technology? What if you could use HDR images and it was totally interactive, and it meant you could light an object interactively via a HDR image that was interactive, and this is basically what we have. So what we have in HDR Light Studio is this is the standalone version, and there's a 3D model kind of loaded in here, and this is our default kettle model. I'll just change the camera back to the front view. Okay, and over here we have a HDR canvas. So this, this looks like the images we were showing earlier of HDRs. And what we can do is we can place light sources onto here, and we have two types of light sources. We have synthetic ones, which are kind of mathematically generated, and we have picture lights. So if I just show you what you can do with a synthetic light, then we can adjust the brightness of it, and we can adjust the fall off at the edge, and we can kind of scale it. Now the important thing is that as I move my light source on this canvas, it's actually being distorted, and this means that if I kind of look at the top here and I just make this a little light, so give it a hard edge, give it a hard edge, and just kind of look at that at the top, you'll see that it's actually maintained its shape. So it's still actually a square. So if I bring it down here, it's a little square, and if I bring it to the top, it goes this crazy shape. But when this image is mapped onto the lighting sphere, it means that the light maintains its shape, and that's really the beauty of HDR Light Studio, in that all this happens for you in real time. So if I just get my front camera again and just scale up my light, so we can adjust the brightness of it, we can adjust the color of this light, and we have our own color picker, which is for lighting artists, where once you've kind of got your color, you have this adjustment area. We can make fine adjustments and see the results over here, and we can change the resolution between the adjustments with the different scale on the side here. And because we're about lighting, you can pick the degree Kelvin of a light source. That's all I'll show you on that bit for now. We'll come back to that later. I'll go back to a white light source. So if we kind of scale this and put it in the middle of the canvas for the time being, we can move the position of the bulb so it kind of goes to the top of the light, and we can move that so it goes to the bottom of the light. So it's very flexible, and then we can scale the bulbs. At the moment the bulb's just a point in the middle, and as we scale this, that bulb gets wider, so we can kind of create lozenges of light. Okay, so all of the synthetic lights work in much the same way, and we also, in terms of the fall off, as we get to the edge of the light, we have this fall off, but we can have a custom fall off, and that means as we go from the center to the edge of the light, we can just kind of double click, put in new values, kind of totally control what happens as the light goes from the middle to the edge, which can be very useful. So just get rid of that. So on our canvas here as well, just to show you around, we can at any point adjust the exposure that we're viewing this HDR image, because remember the values on here can't all be fit on the screen at one time, because it's HDR, so any time you can scroll through here to kind of inspect your image, because that's blown out, but as you kind of reduce the brightness, you can actually see that this light is falling off. So that's kind of synthetic lights. We'll show more stuff about that later. And we also have a library of over 100 photo-based picture lights. So these are all sorts of stuff, guides, gobos, zebra stripes, but we do have a substantial collection of real-world studio lighting that we've captured in HDR. So we've got lots of softboxes, and then we've got lots of different spotlights. So you know, a huge range of them, and those can be placed and moved around as well. So they're the kind of the light types, and we also have a background. So if I just go onto here and just look at some random background. So in here we've got a background image, and I'll just change the gamma on my view so you can see that better, and we can kind of rotate that. We can color that if we wanted to, flip it, and all the lighting that we could do directly on top of this background image as well. So what I'm going to do is that's just some basics. I'm actually going to dive into a proper project because I think it will get a lot more interesting if we do that. So I'm just going to do new project, and I'm going to pick Y up. So I'm going to move over into Maya. Okay, so I'm just going to open a scene that I was looking at earlier. Here we go, taking forever to load. Okay, so what we've got here is a watch model, kindly donated by Tim Cooper, Tim Cooper 3D. And I'm going to open SprayTrace, which is a handy tool, which is a real-time previewer for your mental ray scenes in Maya. And it will just show you what we've actually got here with this watch. So I've got a mental ray scene, and all I've got in it is the watch model, okay, and a mental ray IBL node, and I've just got a kind of a generic graduated HDR attached to that. Now, you know, this is the typical kind of job for HDR Light Studio, in that, you know, how are we going to light this thing? How are we going to control the reflections and make this watch look really good? Because we can't easily just start getting bits of geometry, placing them in the scene, and putting ramps on. You know, we think there's a better way. So if we just close that preview of the mental ray view, and let's got a new feature in 3.5 which lets us push whatever's in Maya through to HDR Light Studio. So here we've got HDR Light Studio there. Let's click on our watch and go to HDR Light Studio, and let's push the selected object across. So that's just going to export our watch. It's just loading it up. That's great. So what we've got there is we've got that watch, and we've got the exact same viewpoint. And what we could do now is we could start using some of those things I showed you earlier, and we need to place those lights in the correct place. So this is where our new feature called Light Paint comes in. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to get a HDRI background, just something kind of random, like office space. Put that around the scene. Let's change the gamma, just brighten this a little bit. and I'm going to colour that so it's just black and white actually, and turn down the brightness. So all I'm doing here is just making it so it's not an absolutely perfect environment. Okay, so I'll close that. It looks really plain, but there's just hints of bits of detail here and there. And let's go and get a nice softbox. So as I kind of scroll through, whatever's under my mouse is handily viewed over here. And so let's pick that softbox and select it. Now in light paint mode, if I click on here, I'm going to place my light based on reflection. So I'll just turn up the brightness a bit. So I'm going to click over here. And that's basically place that light source in the right place on the HDR to get that reflecting totally in the right place. So let's say on this light I actually want to put a bit of a graduation across its surface. It's a bit bright at the edge. So I can actually do that in HDR Light Studio. So let's just dull it off a bit and then brighten it up. So I could click down here and it places it in the right place. I'm going to click there and I'm going to kind of scale that up a bit. So that's that reflection. So because we're lighting a watch and it's all metal, then really lighting by reflection is the thing to do. So I could duplicate, well actually I'll place a separate light, just a small one, over here. Okay, it might even be a bit smaller. I'm going to use this to just get my location look. So I want a nice light sweeping across this surface on here. So I know that's the place to put it. So I'm going to duplicate my softbox and I'm going to scale it down a little bit and just put it over the top of that light there. Okay, and then I can just change the height of that. Just move it over a bit. That's it, I've got a nice light going across that surface there. And I could just get rid of that little light I used as a guide earlier. So get this light. Well, let's just put a little bit of colour on this one. Give it a bit of Kelvin. Okay. Right, so let's just place some synthetic lights now. So let's just do a simple circular light. I'm just going to place it here. Turn down the brightness a bit, duplicate that, put one up here, duplicate that. So all the time I'm in my light paint mode and placing by reflection. So I could just keep kind of placing these light sources just to really start selling the shape. I can see that's a little dull. Okay, so let's get an actual spotlight now from my picture lights. So down here, what should we do? Oh, let's pick that one. Okay, and we want that to reflect in this point here. Okay, so that's a nice bright reflection. Scale that down a bit. Okay, now let's do one more. Nice synthetic again. And let's give this a bit of a kind of a cooler lighting. I'm going to click on the side of the watch here and turn the brightness of that down. So we just get this kind of cool effect down this side. And I do feel this area here does need a little bit of a boost. Let's just kind of go. That's looking nice. Okay, so we've designed a whole set of reflections to make this look really nice. And we've done it directly on our model that we exported from Maya. So what I'll do now is I'll save this project because everything's editable here. So let's just pop down to our Novedge folder. I'll just put watch. So this means at any time we could come back and edit this because you only really commit to the image when you render it. So let's render this in the source images and let's call it demo watch, and we'll save that. So that's now doing the high-res render of that. So that's all done. So let's we can close Live Light, shut that down. So I'm back in Maya. I'll grab my IBL node and I'm going to just put demo watch, which I just made, as my map. And if we start up SprayTrace, we'll get a preview render really quick of our scene. I could render this in mental array to show you, but it's far quicker to do this in here. So you'll see from this we've got all our reflections are in exactly the right place. All the lighting's is exactly as we set it up. Now, let's say that this is on slightly on the dark side. We can just change the color gain on the map here and just say put that to 1. Just boost it up a bit. Okay. And then also I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, do you know what? I think the background's a bit dark, it's a bit high contrast. So I'll come back into HDR Light Studio and we have got this background image in here and we could brighten that. So let's just do that, close that, and we'll call that Demo Watch 2. Render that out. Okay, and then we'll just pick that in Maya. Demo Watch 2. There we go, and we've just boosted that. So I now think that's too bright, so we can just gotta bring that down a bit. So there, I've basically lit this watch in a few minutes. I've placed the reflections exactly where I want them. If I show all, there is some glass on this watch face. Let's just display show all. So that just makes it look even more realistic. Now, in terms of how I do this any other way, I'm not really quite. I don't think I'd tackle it at all in the same way. You know, placing geometry to get this lit, it would take quite a while. And as you can see, we lit this product extremely quickly using the new light paint in HDR Light Studio. And we were able to get it into the actual geometry into HDR Light Studio really quick with these new buttons, these new script buttons that we've added that you can load into Maya to push the stuff straight across. So that's a demonstration of that. So what I'll do is I'll show you another use for HDR Light Studio. I'll just open up another scene. Let's go, there we go. Just right, so what we've got here is we've got a car lit with a HDRI and a background image. So let's just pop this open in SprayTrace. Again, just for the ease of getting something on the screen nice and quick for the demo. Okay, so you can see this car, and it's surrounded by a HDR actually shot on location. And we've got a background image also behind the car, and the car's there's a surface at the bottom catching shadows. And this is kind of as lit, you know, it's as per the HDR data. Now, this looks a bit flat, so what I'm going to do is actually open up version 3 of HDR Light Studio, which we have a plugin for SprayTrace. I'll just pop this open. So what I've shown you just now was actually version 3.5, which has come out soon, and this is the current version you can buy now. So just load up a project called Improve Audio Lighting. Okay, so what we've got in this project is we've got our original HDR, and when it's, just scale that down. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. So in terms of our synthetic light sources, now you can see here we've got a light source over here, and we've introduced different blend modes in HDR Light Studio. So where I was just placing lights kind of on top of the scene earlier when I was showing you, what you can also do is you can use these synthetic light sources. You can see as I move it around how it's affecting things here, but there's amp mode, and amp basically amplifies the content underneath, so it kind of intensifies the map in that location. So we can use that blending mode of the synthetic lights kind of in real time to start to adjust the lighting around the scene. So up here there's a horrendously bright light. Let's kind of just change that to kind of a bluey colour. Now what if we wanted to pick a colour from this HDR background? Well, we could do this because we have a colour picker based on the colour of the HDR. And also it lets us, if you imagine the normal view of a HDR, this is what you're used to seeing, in our colour matching tool for HDRs, in colour mode it gets rid of all the brightness information and it leaves you with the pure colour information. And then in dominance mode we could actually go from reveal the brightest light sources and what colours they are, so you can actually see what the dominant colours of light are in your scene. So, and then we can kind of do a selection. Let's say, you know, we want the average colour in this area. We could draw around that. But at this point in time, I'm just going to grab the colour straight off there and just close that. I haven't quite got time to go into the full detail of the colour matching, but basically there's some cool tools in there for matching colours of existing images, say off the background HDR, or of the background or off a HDR. So we can match colours to high dynamic range images or low dynamic range images. But just back to this demo. So it's just kind of okay that. So if you see here, I've just kind of boosted the lights up here, and I'll use amplify again to kind of intensify that, so there's some natural detail coming through from under that HDR. And again, as I change the brightness on the canvas of what I'm looking at, it's not changing the data that's going across. It's just changing my view, so to help me work and see what's happening. So here I'm just placing another amplify, another one over there, actually putting a bit of a spotlight on top there. Then we're at quite a large softbox, which is kind of out of place and unrealistic, but you kind of have the great opportunity to kind of have a bit like retouching and 3D all at the same time. So we have a lot of customers who are retouching artists who've gotten into CGI, and they're loving the fact that you could kind of take this kind of shot and always retouch it in 3D using our tool. And then finally just put a little round. Oh yes, this is actually in inverse mode, so we're actually sucking out a bit of light in this area here. So if we look at what that looks like, you know, now, and how we've kind of lifted that shot and what that shot looks like, and if I press Control and I click here, I can turn all the other light sources off. So you can see what my image looked like before without the enhancements in HDR Light Studio. And if I click on here, you can see the boost to that image. So this is our preview in SprayTrace, so I could save my map from here, load it into Maya, and then I'd know that my shot was going to look like this when I rendered it at high res using Mental Ray. So yeah, what you've seen here is the plug-in version of HDR Light Studio. So it looks exactly the same as the standalone in terms of the interface, you know, that we showed you earlier, but you don't have live lights because what you plug into is your is your preview directly with all your materials. So at the moment we have plugins for Keyshot, Maxwell Studio, Deep Exploration, Patchwork 3D by Lumiscaf, Vred by PIVR, and yeah, those plugins come with HDR Light Studio Pro version, which is what I've been showing you so far. And yeah, so I'm obviously keeping an eye on the clock, making sure I'm not going over. I think I've been about 40 minutes, so I don't know if there's any questions building up for me. Hopefully, you know, there is quite a lot more I could show, but obviously we're against the clock here, so I just wonder if there's any questions.
Yeah, we got a couple questions coming in. Here's one. The first one's from Will. He's asking, it appears an HDR image is necessary for a background. If I want my own custom background, is it accurate to say I would need to shoot with an HDR camera?
Oh, no, not at all. If I just pop out of here. Okay, let's say that you don't have a HDR shot at all. And so let's actually get rid of that HDR and just go to a gradient ramp. We could, so that first demonstration with the watch, by the way, we have this gradient background, so we can add points on the gradient and we could change the brightness, and what we have is a luminosity ramp and a color ramp. So if I kind of pick the color here, and we've got a background image loaded here, so if I go to that image and pick that, it's quite big, I can actually start to pick colors off of this. Just because SprayTrace is open, my processors are going crazy, but yeah, I can pick the colors off this background image, make my own ramp, and then start to place light sources around there. So you can actually start to embed an object into a background image, even though you don't have a HDR for it. It's possible to do that. My computer's going a bit crazy at the moment. Have you got another question while this sorts itself out?
Yeah, here's another one. A couple people are asking, what other modeling software is HDR compatible with, apart from my...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's compatible with any software in that Live Light supports loading Collada files. Let's just get rid of that. So if I just bring up the standalone just to show you. Yeah, so in here we can load MI files, so mental images files from 3ds Max, Maya, Softimage, and we can load Collada files. So I've got a Collada file here actually. If I just this one came from 3ds Max actually. I'll just drag and drop that in there. So any software that could output an MI file or a Collada or an OBJ. I mean, the disadvantage of an OBJ is that it doesn't have your camera position. So if I look here, I could actually pick the camera view. So if I start moving around, I got my setup wrong way around. It actually was a setup. Apologies. Yes, I just as I start to move around in the shot. I don't think my computer likes being... I'm actually using remote desktop to get to this. Oh, here we go, yeah. So I'm kind of spinning around to this view, and I could get back to my list of cameras. So if you had a Collada file, you'd have all your cameras within here that you could kind of return to that shot, and then you could start lighting that particular shot. So in that respect, any software that could output a Collada file, you can then use HDR Light Studio to use Light Paint to kind of click directly on the model. I mean, and in the demo earlier, I was clicking and showing placing by reflection, but if I go over into illumination mode, kind of get rid of that, pick my light. So I'll use illumination mode for light paint, and I can literally click on my model to place the lights. I'll dim the background a bit and duplicate this light that I've got selected, put a bit of colour on that, and click on this side. It puts the light in exactly the right place, and then you can use combine mode to see the effect of the reflection and the illumination. So if we don't do a plugin so you can see it within your renderer, then you can do so much within Live Light.
Great. Here's another quick one.
Okay.
Can the HDR Studio export into Photoshop layers?
It doesn't into layers, but at any point in time you can turn off, and isolate light sources and render that. And what we do is you can pick for the backgrounds transparent and render to an EXR. So basically you can layer up the EXRs and then do adjustments if you wanted to do, say, blur or some particular adjustment, then you are able to do that. So we don't do a comped up stacked layered Photoshop file, but we do let you export EXRs with transparency.
Here's another one. This one's from Michael. He asks, I'm on a Mac Pro with Keyshot. Is it better to work in standalone and create the HDR image so that you can conserve the CPU power and then take it into Keyshot, or work through the plugin method?
I mean, we've got Live Paint coming in 3.5, and that's definitely going to be available first in standalone. So if you want to be painting light directly onto your object, then that's going to be the first place you're able to do it. But in terms of as an experience, you probably can't get better than using one of our live plugins in your renderer, because what you see is exactly what you're going to get. So the Live Paint will come to the plugins as soon as we're able to get that all sorted. So the best place to do it is directly in Keyshot with a plugin, and we use very, very little CPU power in what we're doing, so it's not going to really hinder your Keyshot experience.
Great. Here's one from Peter. He said, is there going to be another lighting contest on your website soon?
There could be. There could be. We're just getting over the last one. It's something that we could do. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, we will do one. We want to get version 3.5 out the door first and get that in people's hands. But probably a few months down the line, we could run a competition. Sure.
I don't know if you wanted to mention, for those who don't know, give a little background on what your lighting contest was.
Oh, all it was is we invited our users to submit their best work, really, that we were able, they had permission to show, and we got some really good judges, Nigel Harniman and Jeff Patton and Geordie Bears from the Mill, and kind of myself, and just kind of chose some of the outstanding work. I mean, and then the winners got kind of iPods and iPads and whatever. But I mean, what we find is it's we have some really great customers, but most of what our customers do, they stays confidential, or they can't show for a very long time. So having the competition was really, really great, but most of our customers' hands are tied with what they can actually show. But it was fun seeing what people were doing. It was a really good contest.
That's great. Here's one from Larry. He said he was wondering, is a plugin for Rhino in the future?
I mean, we want to plug into anything that we can make stuff plug into. So as soon as we can do something for Rhino, then we will do. I mean, we concentrate to start with on some of the main platforms like your Maya and your Max, where people are really doing the rendering. It can get slightly more complex with something like Rhino, because you don't know what people are going to be rendering in outside of Rhino, so getting that workflow is a bit more tricky. But I mean, you could get an OBJ directly into us, get the camera position in the right place and light something. So, you know, the standalone with live light, you know, means that 99% of people can get something in, light it, get the lights where they want, you know, get the reflections in the right place, and then use that map in any piece of software.
Cool. Just get to a couple more questions here. Here's one from Anna.
Okay.
Noticed that Maya had a built-in HDRI plugin. Is that plugin working in 3ds Max? And can the JPEG photo be retouched in HDR, or is it just for 3D objects?
Well, right, okay. We've got the kind of plug-in to push the data from 3ds Max already working. I'll kind of set that off in the background while I'm talking. So let's just do a new project on this side. So the first question was, can it use this with 3ds Max in the same way as Maya? Yes, you can, and in version 3.5 we've got this button to do it. And we'll be adding this push functionality to push scenes into Live Light in as many bits of 3D software as we can, because once you're in Live Light you can use Light Paint and do a whole load of stuff. You know, so it's a good way of working. I'll just load the scene up. And now the second question was about JPEGs. Could you tell me that again, please?
Yeah, they were just wondering if they could use JPEGs instead of 3D images.
Now, the whole idea is that you are lighting something that's absolutely three-dimensional. So I'm not sure what you mean by that, and I'm not actually sure. You can't light a JPEG because a JPEG, you know, because this here is a 3D object that you can move around. Excuse me. So in terms of can you light a JPEG, I'm a bit confused. I mean, you could load, in terms of a background image that you load in, you could save a JPEG as a HDR, and as long as it was the proportion 2:1, it would load as a background. So if you had a spherical environment that you'd shot, then you could bring it into our software and actually start to dynamically change the brightness and add light sources onto a JPEG background. But you'd have to save that JPEG as an EXR or a HDR file, and then just load it in as a background image. So hopefully that's I'm on the right thread there.
Yeah, I don't know if Anna's still out there, if she wants to follow up. But I guess in the meantime, we'll jump into another question here. Here's one from Brian. He said, does HDR Studio provide HDR photos on their site, and can you make compatible with ZBrush?
We don't sell photos on our site. We kind of sell the software that does all this, create the software that does all of this stuff. You know, there are a number of great places you could go and buy HDRs. You know, ones that spring to mind are like Moof, 360.net, I think it is. There's quite, you know, obviously Dosh Designs have a huge range. I think the cool thing is once you've got HDR that and bought it, you know, with HDR Light Studio, that's not the end of the story. You could kind of use that, repurpose it, add extra lights, boost it, and get total control over the lighting. So, but we don't sell them. And I mean, in terms of compatibility with ZBrush, then yeah, it'd be great to look at just doing a push feature, like I showed you with Maya, where you just push your scene straight from ZBrush. I think there'll be complexities because kind of, if you've got lots of displacements and things layered up affecting the geometry, if you just pushed out a mesh, it probably won't look the same. So you'd almost have to bake out the displacement stuff before you got it into our stuff. So there's potential issues there. I mean, we're predominantly used for lighting, you know, products and cars and things where, you know, you don't have lots of displacements. But no, it's something we definitely want to look at.
Cool. And then just to follow up, that question about the JPEGs was answered correctly.
Oh, cool. Oh,
And
okay, brilliant.
she was happy with your answer. So I
Oh,
think we'll
awesome, awesome.
yeah, I think we'll end it there, the Q&A. I'm going to switch the screen back over to me, and I'm just going to
Okay.
wrap things up.
Okay, well,
Um,
just, thanks to everybody for listening. And that absolutely flew by, actually. So it's been
yeah.
great fun presenting it. Yeah, I can't believe how quickly it went.
Yeah.
And I hope the background tied into the presentation, because I was trying to give a flavour of the different types of lighting, how photographers approach lighting, and once you kind of have that in your mind, it's easier to understand what we're trying to achieve with lighting that watch, in that we were controlling the reflections, we were getting them in the right place and making them sympathetic to the object to make the object look nice. And if you just buy a HDR off the shelf, plonk it around the watch, it's not going to do that. So I hope all those threads came together for people.
Yeah, no, that was a tremendous presentation. Again, I want to thank you, Mark, for participating in our webinar series, and I also want to thank everyone out there who tuned in for this presentation. Before we sign off, though, I just want to give a quick little background on us here at Novedge. We're the leading online design software superstore. We have the best prices around. Staff is extremely awesome, incredibly knowledgeable. Feel free to call or chat with us at any time. Additionally, we do have HDR Light Studio 3.0 Pro, which was what Mark was using for part of his presentation. I put my colleague's email at the bottom there, Bob at Novedge. He is our Lightmap sales rep. He is more than happy to field any questions you might have about pricing or further questions about what HDR Light Studio does. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on before we sign off here is a little community we've created here at Novedge called Rhino Jungle. It's essentially a online community we've created. It's not just for Rhino users. We have a ton of 3D modelers on there. It's a great resource. We have tons of news, trends, tutorials, events. So if anyone's interested, definitely feel free to log on. It's free to register. This webinar will be made available on there for free for you to view. So definitely check it out if you get some time. And then I guess the last thing, I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to add anything real quick before we sign off.
Yeah, just we've obviously got version 3.5 coming out pretty soon on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And just to let people know, if they buy version 3 now, if they like what they've seen and they want to start using it now, the 3.5 is a free upgrade for anyone using version 3. So if you've got version 3 Pro, then you will get version 3.5 Pro as soon as it comes out. So just important for you to know.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah.
Cool.
Again, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Evan, for
You're
attending.
welcome.
We'll
You're
catch you
welcome.
guys next time.